Captain Jeho Kim stood tall in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The room was huge, with walls that reached up into darkness. Thousands of alien representatives sat in rising circles around him, like a giant bowl with him at the bottom. Their eyes, some glowing, some multiple, some barely visible, all stared down at him. He felt small, but he didn't show it. Instead, he kept his back straight and his chin up. Today, he wasn't just Captain Jeho Kim. He was speaking for all of Earth. Ambassador He-jin of the Stellar Republic stepped forward. Unlike the other aliens, she looked almost human, except for her silver skin and eyes that changed color with her mood. Right now, they were a cold blue. "Captain Kim," she said, her voice echoing in the silent hall. "We have watched Earth for many years. Your people make beautiful art. You create amazing music. You help each other in times of trouble." She paused, her eyes turning darker. "But you also fight. You wage wars. You build weapons that can destroy entire cities." Jeho took a deep breath. He knew what was coming. "The Galactic Council has decided," He-jin continued. "Earth is too dangerous. You cannot join us until you change your violent ways." Whispers filled the hall. Some aliens nodded in agreement. Others looked away, uncomfortable. But Jeho didn't back down. "With respect, Ambassador," he said clearly, "you're not seeing the whole picture. Yes, humans fight. But have you asked why we fight?" He-jin's eyes flickered purple with surprise. "Why you fight? The reason is clear. You fight for power, for territory, for resources, like all young species." Jeho shook his head. "No, we fight to protect, to defend. When we see something wrong, we can't just look away." He stepped forward, looking up at the council members. 2 Earth months ago, my ship found a colony under attack by pirates. They weren't human colonies. They were from 3 different council worlds. The hall grew quieter. Even He-jin seemed interested now. "We could have left," Jeho continued. "It wasn't our fight, but we didn't. My crew risked their lives to save those colonists. We lost good people that day." His voice grew stronger. "That's why we fight. Not because we want to, but because someone has to stand up against the bad things in this galaxy." He-jin's eyes had turned a thoughtful green. "An interesting perspective, Captain. But one example does not erase a history of violence." "Then let me show you more," Jeho said. He pressed a button on his wrist computer, and images filled the air around him. Humans rushing into burning buildings to save strangers. Soldiers protecting civilian evacuation ships. Earth vessels facing down space pirates to defend alien merchant ships. "We're not perfect," Jeho admitted, "but we're trying to be better. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy needs people who are willing to fight for what's right." The council hall filled with murmurs again, but they were different now. Some aliens were leaning forward, interested. Others were talking excitedly among themselves. He-jin watched the images float by, her eyes slowly shifting to a curious gold color. "Perhaps," she said finally, "we need to discuss this further." Jeho nodded. He had done what he could. Now it was up to the council to decide if humanity's protective instincts were a feature or a flaw. Commander Sun-Mei Park sat in her dark office on the space station New Horizon, staring at the star maps floating in front of her. Something wasn't right. She had been tracking ship movements at the edge of known space for months now, and the pattern bothered her. "Computer, show me the disappeared colonies again," she said. One by one, red dots appeared on the map. 15 colonies had gone silent in the past year. Not destroyed, just silent. No distress calls. No signs of battle. They simply stopped existing. The door slid open, and Taiwan Lee walked in. As Earth's diplomatic attaché, he always dressed perfectly in his blue uniform. But today, his face looked worried. "You found something?" he asked, looking at the map. Sun-Mei nodded. "Look at this pattern. Each colony that disappeared was newly settled. All were from different species, and the council's response to each one was exactly the same. She pressed a button, and official council messages appeared next to each red dot. Taiwan leaned closer, reading them. Natural disaster. Equipment failure. Colony relocated. He read out loud. His eyes widened. These are all the same message, just with different words. Exactly. Sun Mai stood up and walked to the map. The council is lying. They know what happened to these colonies, and they're covering it up. Taiwan frowned. That's a serious accusation, Commander. Why would they do that? Before Sun Mai could answer, her computer beeped. A new message had arrived. Marked urgent. She opened it, and her face went pale. Another colony just went silent, she said quietly. But this one was different. They managed to send out a message before they disappeared. She played the message. A scared voice spoke through static. Something's coming. Not ships. Something bigger. The council knew. They knew, and they didn't warn us. Don't trust their lies about the other colonies. Don't trust their judgment about Earth. They're using human violence as an excuse, though. The message cut off. The room was silent except for the soft hum of computers. Send this to Captain Jai-ho, Ta-Wan said finally. He's still at the council meeting. They need to know we found this. Sun Mai shook her head. No, not yet. The council has spies everywhere. If they're really hiding something this big, we need more proof first. She turned to Ta-Wan. You have access to the council's diplomatic archives. I need you to look for anything strange. Colony reports, ship movements, closed-door meetings. Anything that doesn't add up. Taiwan straightened his uniform. That's against council rules. I know. Sun Mai looked back at the map, at all those silent colonies. But if we're right, following council rules might get more people killed. Taiwan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll start right away. But be careful, Commander. If the council is hiding something this big, they won't want anyone finding out. Sun Mai finished. She looked at the latest red dot on the map. But we don't have a choice. Something terrible is happening out there. And I think Earth is somehow part of their plan. Dr. Yuna Choi stood in her laboratory aboard the research station Starlight, looking through her quantum microscope. The sample in front of her was unlike anything she had ever seen before. It was a small piece of debris found floating near one of the disappeared colonies. The door chimed, and Commander Sun Mai entered with Ta-Wan. They both looked tired. Please tell me you found something, Sun Mai said. We're running out of time. Yuna stepped back from her microscope. I did. But you won't like it. She pressed a button, and a large hologram appeared in the middle of the lab. It showed strange, shifting patterns that looked like dark smoke. What are we looking at? Ta-Wan asked. The end of civilizations, Yuna said quietly. This isn't normal space debris. It's what's left after something consumes all the matter around it, including living things. Sun Mai stepped closer to the hologram. Consumes. You mean like a weapon? No, like a species. Yuna touched some controls, and the image changed. I found records of similar patterns in ancient data. They call themselves the Void Collective. They don't build ships, they become them. They don't fight battles. They absorb everything in their path. The room grew very quiet. Outside the lab window, stars twinkled peacefully, unaware of the darkness moving between them. How do you fight something like that? Ta-Wan whispered. Before anyone could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Emergency alert, the station's computer announced. Unknown objects approaching Outpost 7. Colony reports possible hostile contact. They rushed to the command center. The main screen showed a terrifying sight. Huge, dark shapes were moving toward the colony. They weren't ships. They looked more like living shadows stretching across space itself. Those are them, Yuna said, her voice shaking. The Void Collective. But why now? Why are they showing themselves? Sun Mai's face hardened. because they don't need to hide anymore. Look, she pointed to another screen, showing a message from the Galactic Council. The message was short. Due to the ongoing security assessment of Earth's application, all human military forces are ordered to stand down and return to Sol System immediately. They're trying to keep us away, Tadwan realized. They don't want us interfering. But why? Yuna asked. The Council is supposed to protect everyone. Why would they let this happen? Sun Mi's eyes narrowed. Because they're not protecting everyone. They're sacrificing some to save others. And I think Earth was supposed to be next on their list. They watched helplessly as the dark shapes moved closer to the colony. The station's communication system crackled with desperate calls for help. We have to do something, Yuna said. We will. Sun Mi reached for the communications panel. Captain Jaho needs to know about this. The Council isn't just judging Earth. They're setting us up. And we're not going to let them. The emergency meeting room of the Galactic Council was different from the Great Hall. It was smaller, darker, and had no windows. Captain Jiho sat at a round table with Commander Sunmei and Taiwan. Across from them, Ambassador Heijin's silver skin seemed to glow in the dim light. You know about the Void Collective, Jiho said. It wasn't a question. Heijin's color-changing eyes turned a deep gray. Yes, we have always known. How many? Sunmi's voice was sharp. How many colonies have you sacrificed to them? The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Thousands, she finally said. Over many centuries. It was the only way to keep the peace. Peace. Ta-Wan stood up so quickly his chair fell over. You call this peace? Entire colonies just vanishing. You don't understand. Heijin's eyes turned a dark red. The Void Collective cannot be stopped. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be fought. They only want to feed, to grow, to consume. So we made a deal. A deal. Jiho felt sick to his stomach. They agree to take only certain colonies. New ones, small ones. In return, they leave the rest of us alone. Heijin spread her hands. It is not perfect, but it saves more lives than it costs. And Earth? Sun Mi asked. Where do we fit in your deal? Heijin's eyes turned that cold blue again. Your violence made you a perfect candidate. Who would question if a warlike species destroyed itself? The collective would feed, and the galaxy would be rid of a potential threat. Jiho stood up slowly. You're wrong about us. About everything. Those colonies you sacrificed. They had children, families, dreams, and you threw them away because you were afraid to fight. There is no fighting the void, Heijin insisted. They are like a force of nature. Everything can be fought, Jiho said. He looked at Sun Mi and Taiwan. Dr. Yuma is already studying them, looking for weaknesses, and we're not going to run away like you did. This is madness, Heijin said. You will doom us all. No, Jiho's voice was firm. We're going to save everyone, even you, because that's what humans do. We don't sacrifice the weak to save ourselves. We stand and fight, not because we love violence, but because we hate watching innocent people die. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. You were right about one thing, Ambassador. Humans are dangerous, but not to the innocent. We're dangerous to things like the Void Collective, and to people who think sacrifice is the same as peace. As they walked out, leaving Heijin alone in the dark room, Sun Mi spoke quietly. The collective is attacking 3 more colonies. What are we going to do? Jiho's face was determined. We're going to show the galaxy why humans fight. The command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha was filled with activity. Screens covered every wall, showing ships, battle plans, and colony locations. Commander Sunmei stood at the main control panel, coordinating with fleet captains across the sector. 3rd Fleet is in position near the Centauri colonies, she reported. 4th Fleet is moving to protect the outer settlements. Captain Jiho nodded, studying the tactical display. And the evacuation ships, moving as fast as they can. Sun Mai said, but we can't save everyone. There are too many colonies, and the Void Collective is moving too quickly. In the science bay next door, Dr. Yuna worked frantically at her research station. Taiwan stood beside her, sending messages to their growing list of allies. The Arcanian ships have agreed to help, he said. They've seen too many colonies disappear. They don't care what the council says anymore. Good, Yuna said, not looking up from her work. Because I think I found something. The Void Collective isn't invincible. They have a weakness. Everyone turned to look at her. What kind of weakness? Jaiho asked. They're connected, she explained. All of them. All the time. It's how they coordinate so perfectly. But it's also why they always attack alone. Too many of them in one place creates interference in their network. Sun Ni's eyes widened. So if we could force them to cluster together, they'd start to break down. Yuna finished. But it would take a massive fleet to push them into that position. More ships than Earth has. Then we'll find more ships, Jaiho said firmly. He turned to Taiwan. Contact every species that's lost a colony. Tell them we know how to fight back. Tell them it's time to choose between hiding and fighting. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Messages went out across the galaxy. Ships began arriving. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Species that had never worked together were suddenly joining forces. On the main screen, they watched as the Void Collective approached another colony. But this time, something was different. This time, they weren't facing scared, isolated victims. This time, they were facing the United Fleet. All ships in position. Sun Mai reported. They're ready to follow your lead, Captain. Jaiho looked around the command center. Humans worked alongside aliens from a dozen worlds. None of them cared about the Council's rules anymore. They only cared about protecting the innocent. Send the message to all ships, he ordered. Today, we show the galaxy that fighting isn't just about violence. It's about standing up for what's right. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. He paused, watching as the dark shapes of the Void Collective grew closer on the screen. And most importantly, he finished, it's about never sacrificing others to save ourselves. Ambassador He Jin stood in the council observation chamber, watching the screens with other council members. A massive evacuation fleet was trying to escape the Void Collective. The fleet carried thousands of refugees from dozens of species, including many from council worlds. The dark shapes of the Void Collective were closing in fast. There wasn't enough time for all the civilian ships to reach safety. Everyone in the chamber knew it. They had seen this scene play out many times before. But this time was different. This time, a human fleet stood between the Void and their prey. Captain Jaiho's squadron is engaging the enemy. Commander Sun Mi's voice came through the speakers. All other ships, continue the evacuation. He Jin's eyes turned yellow with surprise as she watched the human ships move forward. Instead of running away, they were attacking the Void Collective head-on. What are they doing? One council member asked. They cannot win. There are too many of the Void. They know, He Jin said quietly. They're buying time for the evacuation ships. On the screen, the battle was fierce. The human ships fought with everything they had, drawing the Void Collective's attention away from the fleeing refugees. Every time the dark shapes tried to reach the civilian fleet, Jaiho's squadron would attack them, forcing them to turn back. In the command center, Dr. Yuna watched the battle data carefully. The Void are clustering together, just like we planned. But the interference isn't strong enough yet. We need them to group up more. Captain Jaiho's voice crackled through the comm system. Then we'll make them group up. All ships, form up on my position. We're going to give them a target they can't ignore. Captain, Sun Mi protested. That's too dangerous. Your ships will be surrounded. Look at the evacuation numbers, Jaiho replied calmly. We still have 300 children on those ships. They need 5 more minutes to reach the safe zone. He paused. We can give them those minutes. The council chamber watched in stunned silence as the human squadron tightened their formation. The Void Collective swarmed around them, drawn by the concentrated target. Evacuation fleet reports 60% through the safe zone, Sun Mai announced, her voice tight with emotion. The human ships were taking heavy damage now. One by one, their lights began to flicker and die. But they didn't retreat. They didn't break formation. They held their position, protecting the escape route with their lives. Evacuation complete, Sun Mai finally reported. All civilian ships are safe. On the screen, the last human ship disappeared into the darkness of the Void Collective. But they had succeeded. Every refugee ship had escaped. He Jin's eyes had turned a deep purple, the color of understanding. Now she knew why humans fought. Not for glory, not for power, but for moments like this. Moments when standing and fighting made all the difference between life and death for innocent people. Perhaps, she said softly, we were wrong about humans after all. Commander Sun Mai stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Protector, looking at the largest fleet ever gathered in galactic history. Ships from 30 different species filled the view outside her window. Some were large and powerful, others small and fast. All of them had come to fight. Dr. Yuna worked at her station, checking the final calculations. The Void Collective is moving exactly as predicted. They're gathering their forces to strike back at us. They've never faced united resistance before, Sun Mai said. They don't know how to handle it. Taiwan entered the bridge, followed by Ambassador He Jin. The ambassador's eyes were now a bright gold color, the color of hope. The last council fleet has joined us, she announced. Even the oldest species now understand that we must stand together. Sun Mai nodded. How many ships total? 10,000, Taiwan answered. More arriving every hour. News of Captain Jaiho's sacrifice has spread across the galaxy. Everyone has seen what it means to fight for others instead of just ourselves. On the main screen, they could see the Void Collective gathering. The dark shapes were merging together, forming something massive and terrifying. They were preparing for their biggest attack ever. They're trying to scare us, Dr. Yuna said. In the past, this would have made everyone run away. But not today, Sun Mai replied. She pressed a button on her command chair. All ships, this is Commander Sun Mai. You've all seen the recordings of what happened at the evacuation. You've seen how a few brave ships could make a difference. Now it's our turn. She stood up, looking at the massive fleet around them. Captain Jaiho showed us that the Void Collective has a weakness. When they gather together, their connection becomes unstable. Today, we have enough ships to force them to cluster. Today, we have enough ships to hit them from all sides. The response came from thousands of ships, all speaking as one. They were ready. Dr. Yuna, Sun Mai ordered, send the attack plan to all ships. Ambassador He Jin, signal the council forces to take their positions. Taiwan, make sure everyone remembers. We protect each other. No ship fights alone. As the fleet began to move into position, He Jin's eyes turned a deep blue, the color of understanding. You know, she said quietly, we thought human violence made you dangerous. But it wasn't the violence at all. It was your willingness to stand up for others, no matter the cost. Sun Mai smiled. That's the real strength of humanity, Ambassador. We don't fight because we're violent. We fight because we care. The final battle against the Void Collective lit up space like a new sun. 10,000 ships moved as one, following the plan that Dr. Yuma had created. They pushed the dark shapes closer and closer together, forcing them to cluster tighter than ever before. Commander Sun Mai watched from the bridge of the Protector as the Void Collective tried to break free. But everywhere they turned, they found ships waiting for them. Not just human ships, but vessels from every spacefaring race in the galaxy. The interference is working, Dr. Yuma reported from her station. Their network is breaking down. They can't coordinate their movements anymore. Through the command channel, they could hear ships from different species working together. Races that had once feared each other now protected one another without hesitation. The example of Captain Jaiho's sacrifice had taught them all a better way. All ships, Sun Mai ordered, final attack pattern. Remember what we're fighting for. The United Fleet moved forward as one massive force. The Void Collective, trapped and confused by their own interference, couldn't resist effectively. For the first time in their long history, they began to break apart. Ambassador He Jin stood on the bridge, her eyes shifting through colors of amazement. In all our years of space travel, she said, we never imagined this was possible. We were so afraid of fighting that we forgot why fighting can be necessary. Hours later, it was over. The last pieces of the Void Collective disappeared into normal space, their connection broken forever. The galaxy was free from their threat at last. In the council chambers, things were changing too. The old policy of sacrifice was replaced with a new alliance. Every species, from the oldest to the youngest, would have an equal voice. They would face future threats together, not by sacrificing the weak, but by protecting each other. 1 month after the battle, Commander Sun Mai stood in the Great Hall where Captain Jaiho had once defended humanity. But now she wasn't alone. Dr. Yuna and Tatuan stood with her, along with representatives from every species that had fought in the final battle. Ambassador He Jin stepped forward, her eyes now a permanent gold, the color of lasting hope. We once judged humanity for their willingness to fight, she announced to the gathered assembly. We were wrong. They taught us that true civilization isn't measured by how much we avoid conflict, but by what we choose to fight for. She turned to the human representatives. You showed us that violence itself isn't good or evil. It's the reason behind it that matters. You fight to protect, to defend, to save others. And now, thanks to your example, so do we all. Sun Mai looked out at the changed galaxy and smiled. Humanity had been judged and found too violent. But in the end, they had shown the galaxy why fighting, for the right reasons, for the right cause, was sometimes the most civilized choice of all.